Good morning. Happy Friday. And welcome to Coffee with Angel. And let me turn my music off. Background music. How is everyone doing? Does everyone have their favorite brew? I have a typical cafe au lait. I'm a New Orleans girl. Just give me some strong coffee and steamed milk, and I'm good to go. Let's see. We got in the chat. Hello. Hello, good morning. Thanks for joining me on another Coffee with Angel. Just to introduce myself, I'm Angel Cornelius, and I'm the founder of Maison 276 and creator of the award winning 3-step system for silver, gray, and blonde hair. It's designed to brighten, cleanse, and rejuvenate the natural brilliance of your silver, gray, or blonde hair without the use of purple dyes. So you can use one system to take care of your hair, whether you wash your hair every day or whether you wash your hair once a week. One system, the Maison 276 3-step system, effective for all hair types and textures. Good morning, Charlene. Charlene is my sister. And good morning, Grace. Thank you so much for joining me. So today we're going to start with a Q&A. And then we'll get into the topic of today, which is hair loss, which was introduced by one of the listeners that joined us last week. Now, the purpose of the Coffee with Angel is just for me to answer your questions, answer some FAQs. I spend a lot of time every week answering questions that come in regarding taking care of silver and gray hair. I want you to remember that your silver is not disrespectful, it's just different. And once we learn how to take care of our hair and address the unique needs of silver hair and mature hair, your hair can be beautiful, brilliant, and bright, regardless of your age and regardless of your texture. Now, one of the questions that I got this week that actually relates to the topic is about thinning hair. And thinning hair can be caused for a variety of reasons, very much like hair loss. First, it can be hereditary. I always say if you want to know what your hair is going to do older, look at your grandmother, look at your mother, and see what their hair did. You want to know how much silver or gray hair you're going to get? Look at your parents, because it's very much hereditary. Everyone won't get as much white hair as I have. And so thinning is very much like that. But there are some other factors. As we mature, we can begin taking medications. There are a lot of medications that can affect our hair, from thinning to hair loss. There are illnesses that can affect our hair. Some are permanent, like some forms of alopecia, and some are temporary. Maybe we're undergoing a medical treatment. We know chemo and radiation are very common causes for losing hair. So there are an assortment of reasons. And I always say start with your healthcare provider. Don't try to diagnose yourself. And that could be a dermatologist who is a specialist for treating hair loss, among other things, and your PCP, your primary care physician. You may need to be evaluating or looking at the medications that you take. And sometimes those combinations can affect your hair. Another thing, we know that there are a lot of over-the-counter products, medications, and treatment that are designed for hair loss. I'm not here to evaluate any of those because even the experts vary in terms of what they believe the effectiveness of those products are. But I will say, even as it relates to an over the counter medication, you should still consult with your provider because you want to make sure that even that over the counter medication does not have adverse reactions with perhaps a prescription drug that you're taking. So I always say start with your hair care provider to make sure those over the counter products aren't going to interfere with your prescription drugs. So, even though there are a lot of different reasons for hair thinning and hair loss, the one thing that we do know that is common is that it is very traumatic. The term bad hair day has literally only applied to women. You never hear men say they're having a bad hair day, but you hear, if you're a woman, you've uttered that a time or two in your life, and you've certainly heard it from another woman. And that's because how we feel about our hair is so intrinsically attached to how we feel about ourselves as a woman, and it's so attached to our identity. And so how we feel about our hair can not only affect us on a given day, it might affect the people around us. And that's why hair loss and hair thinning is so traumatic for us, because it is very, very personal. And I also say that it really, even though that there are varying degrees from the severe, like alopecia, which is an autoimmune illness, to maybe what some people might consider minor, and I'll share my own hair loss journey in a moment. I think we need to give people the space and the place to process how they feel about that, even though it may not be significant to you. To the woman that's experiencing that hair loss, I can assure you that it is very traumatic to her. So don't discount someone's feelings. Give them the space to process it all. And depending on the severity of their hair loss, they may even go through the stages of grief. So I'll share a little bit about my own journey. And it took me a while to actually connect the dots to figure out why I was even experiencing hair loss, as someone who has created a product to help women have healthy, beautiful, brilliant, vibrant hair. And so a couple of years ago, like thousands of literally millions of people across the globe, I contracted COVID. And I was very fortunate to have a very mild case of COVID. I was only sick really for about 3 days before I began feeling like myself and just going on as nothing had ever happened. And so when I began experiencing hair loss, it took me a while to circle back and connect that to having a mild case of COVID. And so, good morning, Deborah. Thanks for joining us again. And so, as I started realizing, like, oh, I'm experiencing some hair loss, I started doing some research. And here's what I found. Just in general, 40% of women experience some type of noticeable hair loss by the time they reach 50. 40%. That's a huge part of the general population. And then, as it relates to COVID, there are studies that show up to 60% of women who experience COVID also experience some type of COVID related hair loss. Now, it ranges, in terms of how much, but that is still 60% of all women who who are experienced with COVID. Regardless of how severe the COVID symptoms are, the fact that you actually had that virus impacts may impact you having hair loss. The other thing about COVID hair loss, the symptoms don't actually appear until 2 to 3 months after the disease. And the symptoms can continue, meaning your hair loss, for 6 to 9 months. So that's practically a year. So it's 2 to 3 months after you've had COVID, and then the symptoms persist for up to 6 to 9 months. So you can see why, one, it may take you a while to connect the dots and realize that your hair loss is related to COVID. And because it's very gradual and over a long period of time, you can understand why it is so traumatic for a woman. And you look back a year later at your hair, where you were and where you are at that point in time, and realize it's a huge difference. And that's what it was for me. I looked back, and after a period of a year, 18 months, I had essentially lost hair. And so, how did I deal with that? I'll be honest, it was very unsettling for me. Um, and I will be honest and say, I did actually go through some of the stages of grief. Definitely not denial, because I couldn't deny that my hair was gone, but it was, how was I going to address this issue? Um, Being a beauty founder. And for me, I will say that it was very much an internal struggle. Like, literally, no one came to me and said, "What happened with your hair?" Because I've had short hair before over the course of my adult life, just because I might have wanted something different. I would have cut my hair. One of my first big chops was cutting off all of the dye when I made that horrible mistake in my 30s and covered my silver hair and realized, oh, this is not me. And I cut my hair so short, my husband's barber actually was taking care of my hair for a while I grew out my natural silver hair. So it wasn't that I wasn't accustomed to having short hair. It was that this time it was not my choice. The other thing was that I was reconciling these images that were in the public of me, whether it was on QVC or media any other media exposure that I had that had me with all of this hair, and I was reconciling that public, what I thought was a public image, to the way my hair looked now. And so that's what the struggle was. And that's a common struggle for a lot of people. But I really felt compelled to share that journey. And so when Denise last week dropped in the comments, let's talk about hair loss, I thought, that's the perfect opportunity for me to share my own journey that's not indifferent, unlike a lot of women, and to say, I understand how you feel. So, what did I do? Well, first of all, whenever I encounter any type of struggle or challenge, I always try to approach it from a place of gratitude, um, because I know it could always be worse, right? And understanding that while I was challenged personally and didn't personally like my styling options, that I still had a lot to be grateful for. And so that's how I approach any struggle or challenge. And that's how I approached the challenge of losing some of my hair. And then I began to look at it and say, you know what? I'm going to have fun with this. And so, what do I miss about the length? One of the things, not being able to easily wear a ponytail. But you know what? Now there are so many more options for people with silver and gray hair that they didn't have 10 years ago, right? So whether it's protective styles or clip-ins or, even wigs, those are all options that the quality now is so much better that you can use those products through any transition period that you may have, whether it's a big chop or you're overcoming illness related hair loss. So we actually have options. And so you know what I said? Well, if I want a ponytail, I'm going to wear a ponytail. I'm going to do a clip in. And so now when I want a ponytail, that's what I do. And so it was, gratitude, looking at the options that are now available to women with silver, gray, or blonde hair, and just having fun with it, experimenting. And that's what I did. It as, you know what? It's just like having a new fashion accessory, right? That's how I approach it now. And so for that, I would say look at what your options are, regardless of your hair type or texture. There are options available to you on the market as you transition from whether it's a big chop or whether it's an illness related hair loss. Now, if you're simply just growing out, I always want to come back to this. If you just want to embrace your silver or gray and you want to grow it out, I would say there are millions of women out here supporting you, including me, as you transition from your dyed hair to your silver or gray. You don't have to cut it off. You can literally search on Instagram, hashtag grace transition, hashtag silver transition. You will see so many beautiful, amazing women who are growing out their silver that is not even a thing now, right? When I was doing that 30 years ago, people were not growing out their silver. And so that's why I did a complete big chop. But you actually don't have to do that now. The transition hairstyles, in fact, are just so beautifully stunning that that would always be my first recommendation, sis. Grow it out and let us celebrate that journey with you. So now let's talk about hair care as it relates to if you are going through a thinning, hair loss stage in your life. And if you have checked with your provider and you're perfectly healthy, it's not COVID related, it is simply a result of aging, there are still some things that you can do to protect your hair. One, you want to make sure that you're using products that nourish, hydrate, moisturize, and condition. And you want to check your ingredient labels because if you have silver gray hair, if you are experiencing thinning or hair loss, there are some products that you absolutely, or there are some ingredients that you absolutely have to avoid. One, products that have phosphates and sulfates. Frankly, nobody should be using these products on their hair. Why are phosphates and sulfates so damaging? Because they literally strip your hair of the natural moisture that you have. They strip your hair of nutrients. If you look at your laundry detergent ingredients, the primary active ingredient in every laundry detergent is phosphates. Now, you would never think of shampooing your hair detergent. Like you would never think of doing that. But if you are using any type of product that has phosphates in it or sulfates, that's essentially what you're doing. You're literally stripping your hair of moisture and conditioning, and almost anything you use after that is fighting against those phosphates. Another thing you want to avoid, literally this is really for anyone, whether you are experiencing hair thinning or not, products with ammonia. Again, another household cleaning product, I mind you, but there are still many, many hair care products that have ammonia in them. Namely, it is dyes, bleaching products, all of those, many of those, the active ingredient is ammonia because it is literally stripping, just like those bleaching products are stripping the color, they're also stripping your hair of much needed moisture and conditioning. And so, again, it's fighting against any other good products that you could possibly be using. Also, parabens. Stay away from parabens because, for the same reasons, they rob your hair of moisture and they're simply just not healthy. And so, let's summarize what we've talked about. If you're experiencing any type of hair loss or shedding or even breakage, whether it's illness related, whether it's due to a medication or a medical treatment that you're undergoing, you need to avoid at all costs phosphates, sulfates, parabens, silicones, and ammonias. Okay, so let's look in the chat and see if we have any questions. Deborah is saying she just got over COVID. I hope that you're feeling well. I hope that you've recovered. Remember to take care of yourself, even though it's not something that's in the news the way it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. The virus is still quite prevalent in society. So take all the necessary precautions that you need to. Take care of yourself. And we're also coming up on flu season as well. So just stay healthy. Um, and yes, we have to be grateful. Let's see. Charlene is saying she just got over COVID and she's finding her experiencing I'll have, oh, okay. So she's saying she just got over COVID. And so if in the next 2 to 3 months she finds that she's experiencing some hair loss, then she'll know that that may possibly be the cause of it. So great. I'm so glad that you guys are finding this helpful. My main reason for wanting to do these coffee with angels on Friday morning is really to connect with people. I think that, oftentimes when I get a question, a hair care related question, it is almost never the first time, right? It's usually a question that I've gotten over and over again. So don't ever think that whatever hair issues that you have, that you're on your own and nobody else is experiencing this. 9 times out of 10, and it's been my experience as a beauty founder, 10 times out of 10, there is somebody else experiencing that same issue. And so I am just here really to share information. I don't ever want people to feel like they're struggling alone. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you are finding this helpful. So please, if you guys have any other questions, drop them in the chat. I always intended this to be the amount of time that it takes you to enjoy your morning cup of coffee. I want it to be quick. I want it to be fast, impactful, and most of all, valuable. So please drop in the chat any other topics that you'd like me to discuss next week or next week's Coffee with Angel. Also, if you happen to join us late, all of these episodes are going to be uploaded to my YouTube station. I'm sorry, my YouTube channel. You can tell I'm new to YouTube. Just search Angel Cornelius and you will find my YouTube channel where you'll find tutorials on how to use products, tutorials on using and getting the most effective use of the Maison 276 3-step system. I also have some other beauty tips. I've got lifestyle tips like recipes. Y'all know I'm from New Orleans. I love to cook because I love to eat. And so over the last few years, I've really been leaning into a more plant-forward diet. And so I've been really having fun creating some of my New Orleans favorite dishes in a plant version of that, essentially just not using meat. And so feel free to hop on over there and check out some of those recipes. But yeah, so if you're hopping on late, you can always check out the uploaded version. It's usually uploaded about an hour after I finish the live. Okay, you guys. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining me. If you want to send me, if you don't want to drop it into the live comments, if there's a topic you want to discuss, feel free to send me an email at support@maison276.com and I will get back with you. So until next week, thanks again for joining me. I want you guys to have an amazing weekend and I will see you next week. Next Friday, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern on Coffee with Angel. Have an amazing week. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.